I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's the author of the book, The Legendary Guardians Reunions, no other than Miss J.F. Monroe.
For that introduction, Daniel. That's awesome. Happy to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss JF, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I'm JF Monroe. I'm the author of The Legendary Guardians Reunions. It is the first book in a fantasy romance trilogy that mixes mythology with adventure, and all of the messy, deeply human emotions that make stories worth it and kind of stick with you after. The book has, gods, angels, demons, epic battles, but honestly, like at the heart of it all, it really just shares themes of, identity, choice, love, resilience. And when I'm not being JF Monroe, which is my pen name, I am a born and raised New Yorker. I am hanging out with my husband, our 6-year-old, our one-eyed dog. I spend way too much time playing video games, binge watching movies, reading, and fueling it all down with unreasonable amounts of coffee.
Miss Jeff Monroe, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. Who are the legendary guardians and what role do they play in the story?
Sure. So the legendary guardians are the Four Horsemen. And basically, the book is set in a world where, humans, angels, and demons all exist in this world under this peace treaty. And it's held together by the Four Horsemen, these legendary guardians that are basically tasked with protecting humanity from war that could potentially break out. And so one of my main characters, the female main character, Shade, um, this is her journey. She's basically forced back into this world that she tried to leave behind when her childhood best friend Theo returns after 10 years. Only now he's this vessel for the Horseman Death. He is carrying a ridiculous amount of power, and he takes her on this journey with him to reunite the other horsemen and stop this looming threat that could cause war. And Shade's dog also tags along for the ride.
Interesting indeed, Miss JF. So, how does the concept of the Four Horsemen influence the plot?
So, the plot would be nothing without them. They are central to the story. I took the Christian mythology of the Four Horsemen, which, if you look at a lot of the research around it, there's not much, there's theories and there's interpretations, but in the actual, book of Revelation where they were written about, there's only, I want to say maybe like a couple of lines about their intro, and that's about it. And so I really did take some liberties here, but the entire story, the Legendary Guardians, is around these four. Particularly, I will say the Horseman of Death, because he does share the plot with the female main character Shade. Just their connection is central to the plot. But it's really about all of them and this journey that they take together to stop this greater threat that's happening.
So, Miss JF, what is the significance of the reunions mentioned in the title?
So I actually love that reunions is mentioned in the title. When I was brainstorming, different titles, I knew the Legendary Guardians was going to be one of them because I didn't want to always refer to them as the Four Horsemen and confuse people that might actually know the lore of the Four Horsemen. They are very different in this book, but reunions was just so blatant because that's what this entire book is. They are separated, they're completely scattered, and everybody is finding everybody. And it actually extends out, outside of the Four Horsemen. There are other people that come into play in this book that are kind of reuniting. And it's a perfect lead in to the other two books in the trilogy that I have lined up. So when I look at this book, it is literally a reunion. Like that's what this book is. Everybody's got to kind of get together, and then they get to go do what they got to do in the next two books.
What themes of mythology and prophecy are explored in the book?
Oh, I love mythology. I was a classics minor in college. So I have some heavy Greek mythology concepts here, from the actual just the journey that a lot of Greek heroes tend to go on, to actually utilizing some gods that are known in Greek mythology, some beasts that are known in Greek mythology. I really have a lot of fun with it just because I feel like a lot of stories in general pull from mythology. So that was a really, really big thing for me in the storytelling to make sure that I not only incorporate it because I loved it so much, but that I respected it and told it in a way that people may not have been expecting. So like when you hear certain names, and you find yourself, a mythology buff, you can say like, okay, I know exactly, where that's coming from. And if you don't, you'll still know, I lead in and I give information surrounding it. But if you hear it, you're going to nod your head and say like, yeah, okay, I know where she pulled that from.
So, Miss JF, let's talk about the plot and setting. What kind of world does the story take place in, and what makes it chaotic?
Yes. So, admittedly, this is a great question. World building is a challenge for me. So, this is a tough question, but I do love it and I do respect it. When I describe places in this book, I try to keep it simple. When I describe places like Terra Vista, the Void Heart, Arcadia, the Ethereal Valley, or even structures like the Sin's Mansion, I focus on anchoring the fantastical settings that they are with deeply real um, character experiences. So it's not so much like there'll be chaos going around everybody, but my main focus is how the characters are reacting to it, if that makes sense. So the surroundings may be chaotic and magical and otherworldly, but the focus is like the relationships, the emotions between the characters, and how they could remain relatable. So when I approached my first draft of this story, I didn't really have like a deliberate connection between the world building and what happens in the story, like the human emotions. It was more about just getting the story down. That's very big for me. Um, but during the editing process, I started to notice these like connections emerge just from writing the story. So, for example, the Ethereal Valley is described as vibrant and colorful, and it's created by these gods to entertain the human vessels of the Four Horsemen. And it's meant to reflect what the gods think humans desire, which is like bright, shiny objects, right? Bright, shiny distractions. Um, but it also reveals the gods' inability to truly understand human depth. And so some pretty outrageously dark things happen in this really bright and vibrant and pretty place called the Ethereal Valley. And it's such a sharp contrast that it's almost like a shock to the system type of thing. And it wasn't something I was really aiming for. It was just something that just happened. And it worked really well for the story.
Wow. Congratulations, Miss JF, for a nice world building that you did. So, what the major conflicts drive the story forward?
Yes. The major conflicts in this story are internal and external. Um, I love to write external battles and give, I love payoffs and things like that. But what really gets me is when I read back in the editing process, the internal battles that go on. And one of them is identity. So you have to imagine these humans are selected to house within them these entities, these legendary guardians. And a fun aspect of my writing was I would write the human vessels are very different from how I wrote the entities within them. And so like there are a lot of like almost like identity politics involved in the story of how they coexist together within one body, basically, because the entity might be completely different from the human vessel that it takes on. And so I really enjoyed exploring that way more than I thought I would. I actually thought in the beginning it was going to be really hard to kind of write through that. But it actually just was a really good time, and identity was one of the main conflicts that come out of this story, as well as choice. So there's a lot of words thrown around here like fate and destiny, and this is what you were supposed to do. Um, but then we have other characters in the story talk about, no, I'm going to choose to do this. I'm going to choose to kind of go left when everybody's telling me to go right. And so choice is a really big thing there. And then I would say love, both family love and just friendship. Like this is a huge component throughout the story. There's a lot of love going on. There's unlikely love. Love comes in unexpected forms and ways. And so love is a huge it's a conflict, but it's also a huge theme that goes in the story.
So, how does the book blend elements of fantasy, action, and romance?
Ooh, so that is a great question because that was one of the biggest, like, I was terrified of balancing romance and the fantasy elements. It was the scariest challenge for me because I did want to strike that nice balance. So my main focus was to always have the characters' journey and growth be central to the story, with the fantasy and romance naturally weaving into that framework when it made the most sense. And so to achieve this, I approached these romantic elements as a normal, organic part of life, right? Things happen, intimacy is a part of life. And so for my main characters who hadn't seen each other for 10 years, it just made sense that their love and their longing would express itself in that way. What I didn't want was for those intimate scenes to feel forced or out of. I was very intentional about when and how those moments happen. So, like, if they're in the heat of battle, you're not going to have a moment where, they just suddenly pause and things happen. You will find them in more of like quiet, stolen moments when it feels the most natural for those characters to connect. So I never wanted it to just be like about the act itself. It always served the story, whether, it was followed up by like a really relevant, deep conversation, or it was comfort, or it gave a sense of just like release amidst the chaos of everything crazy going on. It always helped drive the story forward. Um, and what I loved so much about this approach was that it allowed the romance to feel real, sometimes fun, sometimes messy, but always just meaningful. And it just became another layer of their character's journey without overshadowing the fantasy elements and the larger stakes of this story.
So, Miss JF, let's talk about the character development and relationships. Who are the main characters and how do they evolve throughout the story?
Sure. So the main characters of the story are Shade, who's the female main character, and Theo, who is the vessel for the horseman. And when I write them, a big thing for me was I'm a very big believer in earned growth. So I really put them through the ringer. Trials, challenges, they're central to the journey because nothing comes easy to them. You know, everything is stacked against them. They're often in the dark, struggling to piece together the truth, almost to the point where even the reader themselves might feel frustrated by just how much they have to endure. But that struggle is intentional because growth is not supposed to be easy. So when my characters do grow, when Shade and Theo do grow and find redemption or persevere, it's not quiet and it is not subtle. A major goal that I had when writing this trilogy was to make those payoffs as meaningful and impactful as possible. So I wanted to ensure that when the moment comes after I put you all through, these hardships, it felt earned. There was no skimping, there were no shortcuts. If you put your character through hell, you owe it to them and to the readers to deliver a payoff that counts. And I hope that I did that within this trilogy.
Very well said, Miss Jaya. Very well said. And what would be your advice for those people out there who want to write their own novel?
Oh, great question. Do it. Like, keep going. There is a lot of creative doubt when you are creative. So I'm not even just going to leave this to authors. Like, when you are a creative, there is always going to be doubt. And so everyone deals with that differently. For me, I had a pretty solid support system. I thought that was essential for navigating it. My family's been incredibly supportive. My niece, in particular, she's been amazing. She read all of my rough drafts of the trilogy before it went through edits, before it got its makeover. I told her, give it to me straight. I need the feedback. Don't make me look, foolish putting this out there. And she came back, and it was just a really wonderful experience. And it grows your relationships, outside of the book. It grows your relationships with your family, with your friends, because they're so supportive, and they're amping you up, they're encouraging you. But I also want to say, just, be gentler with yourself. A lot of times people consider themselves their harshest critic, and that's probably true. And with this trilogy, I learned to just be proud of what I've accomplished, right? So writing a book is amazing. It's a crazy journey, but it's absolutely amazing. Like, you wrote a book, you did it, and you should be proud of that. That's something that you have to keep reminding yourself whenever that doubt creeps in. Like, set your goals, and when you meet your goals, celebrate them and always keep going. Like, you cannot fail if you keep going, because eventually you're going to reach that goal. And so that would be my advice in my long piece of advice in a nutshell, of just like, keep doing it, keep going, like, don't stop, get it down on
Don't
the
stop.
page.
Yes, don't stop, people, and stop procrastinating. If you have the passion to write, write, and share to the world, just like Miss JFK Monroe. So, thank you for your advice, Miss JF. And what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
So right now, I am just trying to, get this first book out there into the world. I want, as many people as possible to be able to read it, to experience it, and then my focus is going to go to book two and book three, with peppered in with, like, just marketing in the middle of it. When I wrote the first book, I kind of did an amateur move. I was like, I wrote a book, and then I put it out there, and I just left it out there and was like, all right, people, read it.
Marketing.
So there's like a lot of behind the scenes things that you need to be prepared to do. Social media is a big component. Get real comfortable being on camera real fast, and get real creative with it. But you can have a lot of fun during that journey as well. But my main focus is getting book two out, probably hopefully for this summer. Fingers crossed, and then book three not far behind. They're written. It's just a lot of like editing and behind the scenes work so far.
Good luck to your goals, Miss JF. And truly, marketing is the hardest part. Let's talk about the symbolism and mythological influence of your book. What symbolic meaning do the Four Horsemen have in the story?
When I wrote the story again, like, they didn't really, I didn't write them as a symbol. They grew to be a symbol as I was writing the story. So when I wrote the story, it was very plain. They are the four horsemen, except they're not the four horsemen that you're probably thinking about. They don't herald
Yes,
in the end of the world. They are here.
apocalypse.
Exactly, right. They don't herald in the apocalypse. They are here to protect the world. In a world of angels and demons, humans need guardians. And so there's a lot of mythos behind how the Four Horsemen came to be, who created them, and then why they protect the humans. And I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil a lot of things. But
Yes.
the symbol itself of them being a symbol, is very much explained in the first book, and just how they kind of came to be these wonderful legacy that they carry out throughout the book and throughout the second two books. So
Yes. So how does the book interpret classical mythology in a new or unique way?
Great question. So some of the characters that you are going to experience in this book, when you hear their names, are very classical myth inspired, and they utilize the classical myth of their name very, very well in this book. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be speaking generally, but like there's a lot of spoilers that could potentially come out in this
Y-
book. So
yes.
um, but it's littered. It is absolutely littered with mythology. And so when okay, this is something I can definitely spoil. I'm just going to do this. So when we talk about the gods of this book, there is the, sovereign of the endlessness, which kind of represents heaven. Let's just say quote unquote. And then there's the keeper of the abyss, which again just kind of represents hell. Let's just call it that. But then there's a middle, right? And so I utilize a particular god that we might all be familiar with in classical mythology that represents that middle, that limbo of sorts. And so there's a lot of lore there, and then what comes out of that limbo. A lot of characters come out of there that people are that are fans of myth, and maybe even not, because they're pretty well-known characters. Are gonna laugh and say like, okay, I know. They'll come back to this podcast and say, I know exactly what she meant when she was beating around the bush here. So
Definitely, definitely, Miss JF. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season. People, Food 101 with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen Food 101 wherever you listen your podcast. So Miss Jeff, how does or what is the biggest takeaway from the legendary Guardians reunions, and how does it leave readers thinking about survival, destiny, and of course, love?
the biggest takeaway is that you don't have to go it alone. Nobody has to do anything alone. And so for the first book, it's really everybody's scattered and everybody's very alone. And by the end of the book, they're coming together and they're getting stuff done. And it carries out through the other two books. But the biggest thing is just you do not have to go through your journey alone. Take people that want to be with you and want to help you with you along, that it's okay to ask for help, that it is okay to lean on people for support, to take them with you. A very big part of the first book when Theo and Shade come together is his conflict, his internal conflict of, I don't want to drag her on this journey because it's dangerous, versus I need her. Like I want her here. And so it's that selfishness versus selflessness. And sometimes it is okay to bring the people with you. They want to be with you. So I would say that's the biggest takeaway of at least this book. You don't have to go it alone. You probably can't. There's going to be times where you're just going to need to ask for help, and that's okay. So that's what I would say is the biggest takeaway from this book.
Yes, indeed, Miss Jeff Monroe. Thank you so much for sharing your novel or your three books to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your books?
Absolutely. So you can find my book on my website, jsmonroebookshelf.com. You can find it on Amazon or Kindle Unlimited for free. I am on social media, jf.monroe for both Instagram and TikTok. And you can also check out my blog. It's also on social media and it is on that website. So please come talk to me when you can. I'm always open to chat.
Yes, people, the legendary Guardians reunion. I hope you will be the next Game of Thrones. Let's celebrate, Miss Jeff. Monroe will become a series or a movie itself. So, Miss Jeff, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Bodycam people, see you soon.